This is a visual video of the different locations you connect your cables on an EVGA Supernova 650 watt G+ gold power supply for a Dell XPS 8700 computer. On the back of the power supply, you can see many different connections. It's recommended to install your cables before installing the power supply, due to lack of room once it's installed. Your power supply comes with many different cables to choose from, and you will have cables left over. Get the biggest cable assembly your power supply came with, and it will have a 24-pin connector on one end, and two connectors on the other end, being an 18-pin, and a 10-pin. The double-end connector plugs into the bottom and bottom right of the power supply. The power supply is marked MB, for motherboard. The other end will plug into your 24-pin receptacle, on your motherboard. Then get the CPU power cable for your motherboard. The cable has an 8-pin connector on one end, and two 4-pin connectors on the other. The cable should be marked CPU. Plug the 8-pin connector into the top right receptacle on the power supply, marked CPU number 1. Some motherboards require a second CPU, number 2 power supply, but not the Dell XPS 8700. Only one of the two 4-pin connectors on the other end will fit the receptacle on the motherboard. Now you have 4 connections marked VGA numbers 1 through 4, on the back center of your power supply. These are the power supplies for your graphic cards. The Dell XPS 8700 only has one PCI slot for a graphics card. Use 2 VGA cables to connect to your graphics card. The cables should be marked VGA or PCI. The cables have an 8-pin connector on one end, and a 6x2 connector on the other. Depending on the make and model of your graphics card, you might need a 6 or an 8-pin connector. Plug the 8-pin connector into VGA number 1 and VGA number 2 receptacles of the power supply. Plug the 6x2 pin connectors into your graphics card. Now the power supply on the upper left has 3 6-pin SATA connections to power your hard drives, SSD drives, and DVD drive. Anything that needs SATA power. Find the SATA cables that you need. They should be marked SATA. They have 6-pin connectors on one end, and a thin flat connector on the other. Plug the 6-pin end of the cable into the SATA receptacles of the power supply. Then plug the other end into your drives. The two bottom left connections marked peripheral number 1 and number 2 are for older drives requiring a Molex-style connector. The power supply should come with a cable for this if you need. After all the cables are installed into the power supply, you can now install it into the Dell XPS 8700's case. There are 2 tabs inside the case, which lock the stock power supply in place, that requires you to bend them down, for clearance for the new power supply to fit properly in the case. The retaining bracket for the top USB connector wires and power button wires will now be right behind the new power supply. Make sure no wires get caught underneath the power supply or pinched. Make sure all connectors are plugged into your motherboard, graphics card, and drives. Hopefully all works well for your new EVGA Supernova 650 watt G+ gold power supply in your Dell XPS 8700 computer.